Hi, thanks for stopping by Grains in Small Places. And today we're going to be making something kind of fun for fall. We're going to be making an apple galette. And we're going to be making it with fresh milled flour, of course. So let's get started. So you might be wondering, what is an apple galette? So if you haven't seen it on TV or trending or in any of the cooking videos or baking shows, things like that, basically essentially what it is an apple pie, but it's made without a pie pan. So it's a free form apple pie. And so you're going to fold in the edges of the pie dough around the filling. So it's going to be kind of fun. This is the first time I've ever made one of these, so I'm a little bit excited to do it with you guys. So let's get started. Okay, so to start out with our apple pie galettes or apple galettes, I'm going to weigh my flour here. I need to start out with the crust because when we start the pie dough, we're going to have to put it in the fridge before we can roll it out. So let's go ahead and get that started. I'm going to be using half spelt. And I'm going to get, the other half is going to be soft white. I need a total of 180 grams. So I'm going to use about 80 grams of spelt and 100 of soft white, but you can just do half and half is fine. I will make sure to put a link in the description box below for the recipe. That way you can print it off. It'll have the weights and it'll have the volume of flour for you. So either way, whichever kind of baker you are, you can use my recipes. I try to make that so that it's friendly for all kinds of bakers. Okay, so we have 180 grams and I'm going to take this over to the mill and we'll go ahead and mill our flour. Okay, here is our freshly milled spelt and soft white. And you want to make sure that this is not too hot. So when you mill your grains, it does get a little bit warm in temperature. And since this is essentially a pie crust, we want to make sure that our flour is not hot or else it will melt our butter. So you may want to pop this in the fridge for a little while before you use it, or let it just sit for just a little while until it can come down to room temperature at least, because we're going to be using frozen butter and cold water in this recipe. Okay, to this we're going to add 1/4 teaspoon of salt. We're going to put in 2 tablespoons of sugar. And then you can get a whisk and whisk this together, or I just like to use a fork. Just make sure that's incorporated nice and evenly. And also while I'm doing this, I kind of make sure that the flour isn't too hot before we start adding in our butter. So what I like to do is use frozen butter, and then I like to grate that right into my pastry. Your other option is to cut it in cubes and use your pastry cutter, which is fine too. That works great. So I do it differently, whatever I'm in the mood for. So today I'm in the mood for frozen butter grated. So I'm just going to open this up. It's nice and cold. I think that the grater just makes the perfect size pieces of butter. So I'm just going to grate this straight in to my dough, best as I can. Make sure it's not getting stuck in there. I'm going to get down to the little bits. Be careful for your knuckles, of course. But when I get down to when it's a little bit too low, I'll just throw the little piece that's left right in. Okay, so just pop that in there. Make sure that I get all the rest of the butter, any of it that's stuck in the grater here. Okay. Then I'm just going to use the fork, mix that around so that it's evenly distributed throughout the flour and that all the pieces of butter are coated with some flour. And then that big piece there, I'll just see if I can break that up. Okay, that's good. All right, now we're going to get our cold water, and we do need to make sure that it is cold. If you have warm water coming out of your tap or it's hot outside, you can even put ice in the water to make sure that it is cold. Okay, and the reason we need it to be cold is because if we put warm water in here, it's going to melt our butter, and then it's going to turn our pastry dough or our pie dough tough. So I'm just going to take about half of this 1/4 cup and just drizzle it around in here, because this amount of water is going to vary for everyone. Some people will need less than a 1/4 cup and some people will need more than a 1/4 cup. So I put half in at a time to make sure that I'm putting in not too much, not too little. So obviously I can see this is still dry. It's not going to come together in a ball yet, so I want to just put a little bit in the drier areas. I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of this in, and then we'll see and come back if we need any more than a 1/4 cup. Because we still want this to be somewhat of a dry pastry. So what I'm basically looking for is this to come to a coherent dough ball, but I don't want to warm up all the butter. So let's see what we got here. So you can see I could make it into little dough balls, but I'm going to go ahead and add a little extra water. You may not need to add any more than 1/4 cup. I'm going to do maybe 1 more tablespoon at a time. All right, so this is looking much more promising. We'll see. I may have to add another tablespoon. So with fresh milled flour and you're making pie dough, it does take longer to absorb the water. So what seems like a super dry dough may end up being exactly what you want. So I'm able to pull this together. Let's see. So I think I'm going to stop here and allow this to come together into a dough. So you saw how dry that was when I started, right before I started touching this, but now it's coming into a bowl. So you just want to work with it a little bit. I'm not kneading it like bread. I don't want to overwork the dough, which is easier to do with all-purpose flour. Fresh milled flour is a little bit harder to overwork it because it always seems to need to be worked longer. Okay. I'm glad I did not add any more because I've got this nice dough ball here. So what I'm going to do is just turn this into a smooth ball and flatten it into a disc. And then I'm going to wrap this with some saran wrap or cling film, put this in the fridge, and let this sit for about an hour to chill before we roll it out. That gives this a chance to absorb all of the liquid. It also makes it easier to roll out. So we will need to mill extra flour for when we go to roll this out. So let me clean my hands real quick and get some cling film. Okay, so if you are wanting to make this ahead of time, you could take this and put this in some cling film and put this right in your fridge, and it'll sit for about 3 days in your refrigerator before you need to roll it out and work with it. If you want to make some and have some on hand, you could always make this and throw it in the freezer. I would wrap it with cling film and then put it in a secondary storage, so a freezer safe container or a freezer bag, and then this will stay in the freezer for a few months. That way you'll always have a little bit of this pie dough ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this in the fridge for about an hour. Okay, so I've already got all of my fruit washed and ready to go. You're going to need probably, these are really large apples, so these are, I'm only using 3, but you will use anywhere from 3 to 4 apples just depending on the size. These are some local apples, beautiful Jonagold. They're like a mix between Golden Delicious and Jonathan apples, and they look and taste amazing. So we're gonna go with these today. You can choose whatever apple variety you prefer. Also, you can decide if you want to peel your apples or if you want to go ahead and use the peelings, keep them on. I think I'm gonna go ahead and leave the apple peels on today because I kind of like the look of how they look, and since the galette has like an opening on the top, we'll be able to see the apple skins, and I think it'll just make for a really pretty dessert. So I'm just gonna cut these in half, and then I will cut them into really thin slices. I'm looking for somewhere about 1/4 of an inch thick or so, and then we're going to just put them in here with some fresh lemon juice to help them from oxidizing too much. Obviously, there's going to be some happen, and I don't have a problem with that because they're going to be baked anyways. So we're looking for, I don't know, about that size. Yes, nice, crispy, and delicious. And I have little dog eyes over here that would like a taste. I'm going to pull the seeds out of the lemon here. Okay, and then I'm just going to go ahead and squeeze about 2 teaspoons or so. Probably, I don't know, 1/2 of a lemon. Depends on how juicy your lemon is. Just put my hands here to catch any seeds, which I think I got most of them out. Okay, that gave us a nice amount of apples. So hopefully my bowl is big enough to go ahead and stir all of these together. Okay, so I think because we had such a large amount of apples, I'm going to go ahead and use the other half of this lemon. And these are kind of sweet apples anyway, so they can handle it. But I think I'm going to actually transfer these to my bigger bowl, because I don't want to have an issue with not being able to get everything mixed together. Now I know I need a bigger bowl. Okay. So look at those beautiful apple slices. So to this, we're going to go ahead and add some brown sugar and some seasonings. We're going to use about 1/4 cup of packed brown sugar, and we're going to use about 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. I like to use my Ceylon cinnamon, and I need to refill my little container, so I'm just going to go ahead and grab from my bulk container that I refill my little container with and do 1 teaspoon of that, and then we'll set this aside and go ahead and fill that up later. And then I'm going to grab my little zester here, and I have a piece of whole nutmeg here. You can use dried nutmeg if you prefer. I just think this really amps up the flavor. We're going to use about 1/4 of a teaspoon or so of the nutmeg. And oh, that's so fragrant. Okay, and when you're milling your flour for your dough, go ahead and just mill just a little bit extra. This is like, I don't know, 15 grams, maybe 1 to 2, probably 1.5 to 2 tablespoons. And I'm going to put that in. This is going to help our apples thicken, so the juice that's released from the apples will help with the flour, and it just becomes a nice pie filling. And if you want to use this for a regular apple pie, feel free to do that. It makes a great regular apple pie too. Just going to mix all this together now. And then after this is all mixed together, we'll probably need to mix it again once the juices start releasing from the apples. It smells so good. Okay, so I'm going to let this sit. I'm going to go ahead and cover this and put it in the refrigerator while we wait for the pie dough. That way the juices can start releasing, and then I'm going to need to stir this again like I was saying. So let's pop this, cover this, and pop this in the fridge. Okay, so this has been chilling for about an hour. I've got my little work surface here so that I can roll it out into probably about a 12-inch circle or so. I milled some extra flour when I made the dough. You can mill it whenever, but you don't want it to be hot necessarily. I've just got a pizza pan here, and I've lined that with some parchment paper, and then my little roller here. So we're gonna go ahead and roll this out. And after we roll this out, it's going to need to chill for a short period of time before we actually go to bake it. Look at that beautiful freshly milled flour. You can see all the whole grain healthiness in there. So let's try it like this. I do have a little tip for rolling out pie dough that you can use the plastic wrap to do, but this little guy seems to do a really nice job. So let's see. It's still a little bit on the stiff side. Let me go ahead and just dust my work surface with some flour. I guess I forgot to do that. And my roller. All right, back in business. If it starts to split, that's fine. As long as the splitting's just on the edges. But they'll grow as you roll. And I love how you can see all the little pieces of butter throughout here as well. So this is nice. It has a nice marking on this 12-inch for me. I like the curving action that I can use with this roller even when I'm making like my tortillas and stuff, because it does such a nice job at like making things round, and it's helping me piece together some of these cracks without having to manipulate it too much. Okay. Let's see what we got here. Obviously, it's not perfectly round. And that's okay. So that's my 12-inch mark. I'm pretty much there. Just a little bit more. Okay. So I'm just going to give this a little push on the edges because this isn't going to be in a pie dough. We're not going to have that beautiful crimped finished edge. So I just want to bring this together a little bit. Look at that nice, beautiful, these pieces of butter in here. Those are probably those larger pieces that didn't get shredded in when I was shredding the butter. Okay, that looks good. So what I'm going to do is transfer this over to my pie pan, or over to my pizza pan. I guess it's pizza pie, isn't it? And actually, so you can see better, I think I'm going to go ahead and just kind of clean this up a little bit so I can pull this down here and you can see better. And that's one great thing about this mat is I can do this and the majority of my mess is in here. Voila. Okay, so I can pull this down. And here is the filling that has been in the refrigerator. And I just want to give this another little mix to make sure that all my sugar, seasonings, and everything are evenly distributed. I'm not kidding when I tell you this smells amazing. So when we go to fill this, which this may be too much filling, I don't know, we'll find out. When we go to fill this, we can choose whether we want to just dump them all in here like we would a pie, or we can lay them out really pretty. But what we want to do is we're going to put this filling in the center. Okay, so my battery died and I'm sorry about that. But before we put this in the fridge, I have a simple egg wash here. It's just an egg with some water. And we're going to move that out of the way. Mix that up. And this is going to be applied on our pie crust area. Not necessarily on the apple area. So one of the tricks to this dessert is you don't want to roll your pie crust too thin or you have an issue. Okay, so I have this like turbino sugar or this raw cane sugar, sugar in the raw, whatever you want, that thick sugar that stays thick sugar. And I just want to generously put this all over the top of the galette here. And it just makes for a beautiful finish and just a tasty, tasty little bite on the top. So this may have been a little too much, I don't know, but my family will love it like that. Okay, so what we're gonna do is put this in the refrigerator for 20 minutes and then we will bake it, and I'll let you take a look at it then. So with the apple galette, you do want to make sure that you don't skip the refrigeration step, because if you go straight to baking it without refrigerating it first for at least 20 minutes, then the whole apple galette will kind of fall open when you go to bake it. So I don't want that to happen to you. And then also, if you leave it in the fridge too much, you may want to help prop it up and cover it if it's longer than like 2 hours or so. That way the same thing can happen, is all the moisture can get absorbed into the pie crust and then it will fall apart also. So it's kind of that sweet spot in between there, or you can freeze it. So I just wanted to throw that little tip out there. Okay, we're going to preheat the oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit for about 35 to 36 minutes or so. We'll give or take. We'll keep our eye on it and check on it. Okay, here she is, fresh out of the oven. So I'm happy to report that the sides did stay up how we wanted. I had a little bit of leakage here because you can see my finger went through when I was shaping that and some of the liquid leaked out, but I think that's okay. All in all, I'm going to call this a win. I think it turned out pretty cute and it smells amazing. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today as we made our apple galette. I think it turned out pretty cute, especially for my first time. We did have that little bit of leakage, but it's starting to firm up as it sits. So we want to let this sit for about 10 minutes before we try to even think about cutting into this. So we did add the flour to it, so that helps thicken it a little bit. But we're going to go enjoy this now. So I hope you have a great day. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell down below. That way you'll know when I put out my next video and you won't miss any of my content. So thanks for stopping by Grains in Small Places. Goodbye. I didn't drop it.